I'm hooked up. All right, that's loud. I get excited, I get passionate, especially when the Spirit of God moves, so hopefully I don't start running around dancing. All right, some of you guys know me. Actually, there's one in the room who has heard my full testimony, I believe, and so it's exciting to see him here. You'll only hear a little bit of it. The story's an hour and a half long, 2 hours long, and that's just, that's a little bit long for today. But it is great to be here. A little bit about myself. As he said, my name is Kevin Cox. I am a pastor at Calvary Loveland here in town. I've been a pastor 11, 12, 13 years. Been in ministry 20 plus years. I'm the CEO of CorKat Data Solutions here in town. We manage the entire IT infrastructure of companies across the United States. So we manage the infrastructure, we manage the user experience, we manage security. In addition to that, we own and operate a Tier 3 data center where we virtualize all that infrastructure into our cloud. That's what we do on a day-to-day business. There's a lot more details into that, but that's what we do. We've been doing this again for about 22 years, and I'm very proud of the processes that we put in place, the service delivery, the line item of services, our client management, how we communicate with our staff, how we communicate with upset clients, all of those things of small businesses, but that's not what sets us apart. There's thousands of companies across the United States, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of companies that do exactly what it is we do. Anyone can provide the same ingredients that we provide in order to do our business. There's a lot of companies that provide backup solutions, virus protection, patch management, hardware, infrastructure. Our uniqueness isn't found in the ingredients of our line items. Our ingredients is not found in how we even manage people. Our success really comes down to our unwavering commitment to our identity and our purpose. And our primary focus on our identity, our primary focus on our purpose is our culture, is internally with our staff. How we develop our staff beyond tasks, beyond, here's your job description, go out and do this. You know, it's very difficult when you just expect people to perform when you don't even know who they are. And so our success really comes down into the day-to-day engagement and involvement with our employees. And so, where are we at? I'm no good with this. See the confusion up there? I like those two images because there's so much that goes into training staff. There's so much in there, teaching, knowledge, coaching, skills, development, learning, workshops. All of that is to make our employees better, but there's really an ingredient that we have to get to that's underlining all of that. There's some things we have to deal with. It's hard to come here today and to be vulnerable. But I'm going to ask you to be vulnerable today. I'm going to ask you to take a look into your life, to take a look into your past. I'm not going to ask you to come up here and broadcast it. That would be unbiblical. We only share those struggles of life, those things that we've gone to with trusted men and women that God has brought into our life who can hold a secret, who cannot blab things across the internet and share those things in order to develop us. And so I am going to ask you to be vulnerable today. But I want to begin with our identity and our purpose. We can establish, I think I got to jump ahead to one. There we go. We can establish principles, guidelines, processes, but there's no two people that are alike. No two people think alike, act alike, solve problems alike, deal with customer relations alike. And so when we develop our staff for success, it requires time. It requires understanding. It requires commitment. It requires confidence. It requires patience. And when we're in business, or whether we're talking about business, whether we're talking about our home life, our community, or even our church, we are in such a hurry that we forget to slow down to truly understand the people that we're talking to understand what they've gone through in life. What is it that defines who they are? Why does staff respond the way that they respond? So we could create policies on how to complete a task. We can even get compliance on that task. But when our staff believes in the purpose, when our staff believes in the purpose behind it, they engage with passion, commitment, and excellence. When they have buy-in, some of us talk about ownership mentality. When our staff has ownership mentality, when they believe that they are appreciated, they're not just told it, but they know it. when they love the people that they work with, when they want to serve the people that they work with, then you have passion, then you have commitment, then you have success. In order to achieve that success in leadership, and we're all called to leadership, correct? We're all called to serve. We're all called to help people. We've heard some scriptures today that talks about that. But note, since no two people are alike, we have to have the proper mindset. And it begins with that. Scripture says that Christians are called to be of the same mind as Christ. That's a high order. It's a tall order, but that is the standard in which we are to live our lives by. We are to wake up every single morning understanding that our employees eat, their kids eat because of decisions we make. We don't go there just to accumulate wealth. We go there to build up these people. And we are to have the same mind that Christ had. Christ took upon himself humanity. He humbled himself. He came down off the cross. Imagine that, the God of the universe, the God that created all things, the God that knitted you together in the womb, humbled himself and became one of us. Not just to become one of us, but to serve us. To humble himself to the degree that he came underneath you and washed your feet. Think about that mindset for a minute. To lay down his life in sacrificial service so that we, through faith in that life, through that life, death, and resurrection, we could have life. And then he said, go and do likewise. Go and do likewise. He didn't say go and do likewise part of the time when it's convenient for you. He didn't say go and do likewise when your wealth has finally reached a level to where you've achieved success and now God gets part of your time. He says to have the same mind that was in Christ Jesus. This mindset is to lay down our lives in sacrificial service to one another. The famous verse, God so loved that he gave. God so loved, that means that God's love within him compelled him to lay down his life because he saw the highest need of the people that was in front of him. And he knew that they were incapable of achieving success on their own. So he chose within himself, his love moved him within himself to sacrificially lay down his life in sacrificial service. And that's what we do in business. That's what we do in our church. That's what we do in our home. We create an image of God in our hearts and in our minds of what God looks like. And we have to pursue that. We have to passionately invest time in that. And when it comes to business, I'm only going to talk about a small section of this because there's 1,000 ways we can incorporate this. But it begins with a commitment to understand people. Whether it's your children, whether it's your spouse, whether it's your community, whether it's people in your church. We treat them as if they're just names and we get them to move through their day so that we can get through our day. But it begins with understanding who these people are that God has blessed us with, that God has brought into our life. Every person's life experiences define or has the influence in their life to define who they are. Their upbringing, their childhood, their education, elementary school, daycare. Every experience that we have gone through, our challenges, our chaos, our trauma, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Have you ever experienced people that have the great potential? You look in their lives and you say, man, this person is going to succeed in life. But then there's something about them. They have all the potential, but there's just something that they lack. Perhaps they're lazy. Maybe something triggers them and they respond, kind of touchy towards clients. They're quick-tempered. They deal with some struggles of life. We all know these people. Perhaps we're one of them. We all are at times. There are underlying factors and experiences that influence this behavior. There's underlying triggers that cause this behavior, and it directly impacts our identity, our purpose, whether in our personal life or our business life. Because of this, at CorKat, we intentionally strive, we intentionally deal with self-examination. Each one of us in leadership, and we encourage our employees as well to begin with self-examination. Your ability to be successful does not begin with the product that you sell. The resources that you hand out, those are just an investment in your hands that has been given to you by God to impact other people's lives. It begins with a self-examination, and then it goes on to understanding your staff and understanding the people that God has brought into your life in order to succeed. As a pastor and as a business leader, I minister to married couples, I minister to young adults, I minister to employees and family every day of my life. My office is an open door where my staff has the ability to come in, and not just mine, but other doors are open as well, where we minister into their struggles of life. It begins there. But I deal with these struggles that they're facing, whether it's in the home or the workplace, it doesn't really matter. Most relationship struggles, what's the number one cause of friction in a home? Finance. And what's underneath finance? Communication. And what's underneath communication? A lack of understanding. A lack of understanding of that person. Why does my wife always respond this way? Or why does my husband always respond this way? Why are they moody? Why are they touchy? Why are they kind of, when this situation comes up, they need to escape. They need to go out to the garage. They need to do all of these things. What is the underlying reason for the financial issue that we think is causing the issue? It isn't. It's something underneath that. Most of struggles, disagreements come back to a lack of understanding. It's a lack of information about the other person, which results in misguided expectations. When we don't understand what the people in our life, including our employees or our spouses or our children, when we don't understand their identity, we create expectations for them based upon our understanding of what they should be able to do and not what God has called them to do. The only way we can get to that point is to clearly understand who they are. I want to tell you a little bit about my story. Again, this is the mixing bowl that is Kevin Cox. Now again, we have to be vulnerable. I don't care what people know about me. Again, I've been in business 20 years and I don't care what anyone thinks about me. They are not the secret to my success. And so I want to tell you a little bit. And again, this is brief. This is very brief. My story's long. But I grew up as the youngest child of 8 back in Kansas. I was the youngest, and really by the age of 8, 9 years old, I don't remember my brothers and sisters. I have relationships with them, but they weren't in the home. They were already grown up and they were already gone. So I really felt like I was alone in my home. I didn't have a relationship with anybody else within my home. My family was heavily influenced by alcohol. Both of my parents were alcoholics. Alcohol shaped their behavior, how they treated me, how they engaged family unit. They didn't have the ability to parent the way we would think of parenting simply because of their life was influenced by alcohol. So it drastically impacted the way that they raised us. It also impacted their marriage. I'm thinking about it today. I can't remember a time and a place where my parents were both in the same room or even had a conversation together. There was just distance. And because of that distance, it impacted their finances. My dad worked all day. My mom spent all day spending it. And so there was a disconnect. They were going 2 different directions, living 2 different ways of life in the same home because they had a conflict. They had something going on between them that I had no clue what that was at the time. It affected their mental health. There was no peace. There was no joy. There was no purpose. There was no identity. There was no reason for living. They had no hope. It was just struggle. It was just a fight. And I'm being raised up in the middle of that. And so my entire perspective of life was molded by learned behaviors centered around alcohol. Everything that my life, that pictured my life included alcohol. I saw alcohol in times of happiness. I saw alcohol in times of pain and struggle, goodness, health issues, all things of life, anger, violence in my home, parties in my home. When everything was supposedly going well, it was only because it was masqueraded by alcohol. Everyday conversations, the ability to communicate with other people, their conduct and their character drowned in alcohol shaped my worldview. It shaped how I believed natural relationships were to be had. How I dealt with other peers in school, even as young as 9, 10, 11 years old. I grew up fighting, I grew up hurting people, I grew up beating people. I grew up twisting every situation around so that I could take advantage of people. I looked for the con. I looked for the way to play people for my own advantage. What's in it for me? I fed my human nature. Sin comes from within, and all I did was feed that in order to get whatever I wanted out of life. As a child, I lacked even the basic understanding of life skills. My parents weren't in a position to guide me through schoolwork. I've never had help with my homework. No matter what age I can remember back, I told someone earlier, I can remember all the way back to about 4 years old. And I can remember almost every single day of my life. My mind works that way. I do not have one memory of ever being helped with my schoolwork. Personal development, relationships. There was zero guidance at any point in time. I walked myself to school. I came home from school. I did my homework. I ate food. I went to bed. I went to play. There was no interaction. There was no parenting. I watched other families. I watched my friends' families and the way that they expressed their love for one another, the way that they developed relationships. I remember this story in my head when I was young. I think I was 9 years old, and there was a Christmas musical at my elementary school, and I was so excited to go to this musical. I don't know why, because I should never be allowed to sing. But I was so excited. I put on my dirty best. And I was excited about the shirt that I was wearing. I don't know why. But maybe the shirt was new to me, but I don't know. But that shirt, I walked downstairs. I walked to my family that was in the room, and they're all doing their thing. And I said, hey, I'm going to the musical. It's a Christmas musical. It's all about, Christmas and love and joy and happiness and all these things. And okay, I'll see you later. I walked out, and I walked to my elementary school. I was excited to talk to the teacher and to tell her how excited I was about my shirt. And I got up there and I sang along with all the other kids. But as I'm singing, I'm looking out at the audience. Everybody else's parents were there. Everybody else showed up. Whether good, bad, or ugly, whether we sounded good or, and I know we didn't, but they were there. I didn't have that. That experience created within me, it was the ingredients of my life that created within me how I would interact with all the other kids, all the other parents as I was beginning to go through life. They weren't able to teach me those things. They weren't able to guide me in those things. And so that confusion over watching all these other families created confusion and pain in my life. All of these were additional degrees and levels of frustration, anger, and pain. Helplessness. At 10 years old, my parents called me down into the kitchen. It was me and my brother and my sister, the closest ones to me in age. And they called us down and they said, we're getting a divorce. And they wanted me to choose which one I wanted to be with. No child should ever be put in that position. I don't care what the reason is. No child should be put there. But as I sat there, I listened to my brother and sister, and they cried. They said, I want to stay with my dad. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking at my mom, an alcoholic. And I don't understand the relationship between the two at this point. I learned later on in life. You won't hear about that today. I'm out of time almost. And so as I began to think about that, I said, well, I want to go with my mom. I don't want her to be alone. A few days later, I noticed Mom's gone. Where is she at? I didn't understand how come my mom left me. And so that created the idea of abandonment. And that idea of abandonment impacted my perspective of relationships, how I would relate with people. From that day on, this wrong perspective showed itself in my life in a desire to control people, to have power over people, to have dominance over people, to suppress everybody in my life, to treat them like they were worthless in order for me to feel good. I had a deep, passionate fear, a depth of fear that is hard to explain over losing people. And so because of my fear of losing people throughout most of my life, I treated them very poorly. No, that's the opposite of how we gain people. But when you're raised in this environment, by making people feel trapped, we think that they will love us. This became the foundation of my life. The ingredients that led to how I interacted with people, and this is only a small screenshot into it. It included anger, it included rage, it included violence. I could tell you story after story The biggest story that impacts my heart the most, I think I was 14 years old at a skating rink, and there was a man going to his high school prom. And again, my entire family grew up fighting, grew up hurting people. Not just getting in a fight so we could shake hands later. It was the kind of rage to where your fist had to go through their skull because there was no friendship after this. There was no coming back. This man was wearing his suit, and he was on his way to his prom. And I beat him just to impress the people in front of me. He never made it to his prom. He didn't make it there. I made sure he didn't make it there. Not because he ever did anything to me. He did nothing to me. But the people that I needed to like me, I needed to impress them. These are the ingredients that led to how I interact. Anger, rage, violence, loneliness. At times of isolation because of depression and anxiety, eventually hopelessness. I had no hope. I desperately wanted to be loved. I desperately wanted to belong. I desperately wanted to be cared about. And so I did whatever it took to gain people's attention, whether that was stealing, robbing. I robbed my first house when I was 10 years old. I turned to crime, violence, and alcoholism in order to numb the pain and cope with life at 10 years old. Now, you would never have known that I had these internal struggles going on. I wore a mask, and I wore it well. And when that mask began to fade, I put on a new one. I deceived myself, I lied to myself, and I convinced myself that I wasn't the problem. You were. But in my early 20s, I'd been in and out of jail more times than I can even remember. I have more DUIs than I can remember. I got 2 DUIs in 10 minutes. I think they were playing a game with me. And I don't say that with joy. In an attempt to outrun my problems and get a fresh start, I moved to Colorado. I learned very fast that changing locations doesn't change the man. But I felt if I could just get away from this pain and get away from this struggle and get away from these people that have hurt me, because of that, my mindset was I did nothing wrong. I didn't do anything. Why is everybody else treating me this way? I felt that if I just changed my circumstances, changed my place, changed my location, changed my job, changed my family, changed my whatever, everything else will just work itself out. With no plan, no resources, no help, I spent 2 years homeless in Fort Collins. I began at that point in time, I know the homeless system extremely well. Now, you would never have known I was homeless. I had too much pride for that. You're never going to see me on the streets. But I slept behind businesses in Fort Collins. I stole every meal that I ate for 2 years. I know the con. I understand the problem. But I began to beg God for help. I spent 3 years on my knees begging God for help. Asking God, I just wanted to wake up without a desire for alcohol. I just wanted to wake up without the anger, without the rage, without the confusion, without the loneliness, without the depression, without the anxiety, without the feeling of hopelessness. I just wanted to wake up and stop using those things as a crutch for coping with life. I wasn't a Christian. I was far from it. I was an American, so I guess I'm born into it, which is the idea. I believed in the existence of God, treating him like a genie, expecting him to show up and answer my prayers without taking any personal responsibility for my own actions. Right? When things are good or things are bad, it's when I need you. That's when I need to call upon you. Otherwise, just sit on the shelf. I'll get a hold of you later. That's how I treated him. And then I got arrested again in Fort Collins. There was a bar fight going on. I wasn't involved. I've been arrested more times for things I've never been involved in. I would take a laundry list. I've been arrested for robbing houses, hurting people, bar fights, where I wasn't even close to the scene. A different story for a different day. But I was at this bar, and a buddy of mine got into a fight, and they arrested me. Somebody said he was in it too, and so they arrested me. I did know the guy, I just wasn't involved in it. While I was sitting in jail, I prayed the classic jailhouse prayer. God, get me out of here. Get me out of here, and if I ever come back, I'll dedicate my life to you. Just open up these doors. And the next day, the doors flung wide open. They dropped the charges, and they let me go. And I have As the doors opened up, I was excited about getting out, but I had nothing to go to. I had no purpose. I had no money. I had no resources, no family, no support system. I returned to the streets, surviving by theft and deception. But God. 1 year after that, almost to the day, I was 25 years old. I was out of options. I was angry. I was hurt. I was in more pain. Other things happened in my life to increase the pain that I won't talk about today. Asking for help felt like weakness to me. I was raised in that environment as a man, that if we asked for help, it was a sign of weakness. You better stand up. You better pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You better be able to do your life your way and to do it right. Just get out there and earn your way. And so there was no way I could ask for help, so I was out of options. I was so full of rage and alcohol. I was sitting, I had stolen a bunch of money from a store, and not robbery. There's a con within the homeless. There's ways of getting money. And I got this money, and I was sitting in this hotel room, and I just received some news from back home, and I used that as an excuse to get drunk, and I was angry, and I was hurtful, and I didn't know what to do, and I began to beg God for help, and there was no answer, there was no voice, there was no pill, there was no magic pill, there was nothing coming to me, there was no answer, there was no solution, except for this thought: rob a hotel. That was the only thing that came to me. Rob a hotel. I hated that thought. I hated that. I fought with it. I raged back and forth with it inside of my head for a very long time, but it just would not go away. So I got angry and I ran across the street. I jumped the counter and I demanded the money, and I took off and I ran. There was a lady behind the counter, a young girl. There was no physical harm. I didn't hurt anybody, but I placed more mental harm upon her than I could ever imagine in my life. I scared the daylights out of her. I got away. I ran across the street. I ran up to a little restaurant there, and I ran up to the door. I was about to grab a hold of the door handle, and something within me said, "Don't go." So I stopped, and I turned left, went back to a hotel room. I found out later on that the police and the dogs were right behind me. They were gaining on me, and they ran up to that door. They opened the door, and the food threw off the scent for the dogs, and they lost me. Angry and helpless and not knowing what to do, the first thing I wanted to do was to confess to the world and tell everybody what I did. I couldn't hold on to this pain and this conviction that was in my heart. Something was bringing me to a place of humility and really brokenness, to where I didn't know what to do with this pain that I was dealing with. So I called a guy that I knew, and I told him about it, and he said, "Oh, just come over to my place. I'll set you up for a month. Just give me the money." And so I did that. And I was over there, and I gave him the money, and I was sitting there, and then he kept coming up to me, "Hey, let's go rob another hotel. Let's go rob another one." The anger was because I trusted this person, and sometimes we pour our information into people that we shouldn't be pouring our information into. And we have to be very wise about that. And I did that. I poured out my heart and soul to this guy, and now he's turning that around against me. He's trying to convince me to go and do it again. I hated that. Because doing that act ripped my soul apart. I called my dad. I was 25 years old. I called my dad, and I tried to hide back my emotions. I thought I did a pretty good job, but my dad said to me, and I remember this, I can still hear his voice in my ear. He said, "Son, I don't know what you're about to do, but I want you to know that I love you." "Why, Dad?" That's the first time my dad ever told me he loved me. I'm 25 years old. I'm lost. Why now? Why show up now? Why say those words to me now? Why not 13 years ago? Why not 20 years ago? I got angry. I hung up the phone. I grabbed my buddy. We jumped in the car, and we went in Fort Collins, and I robbed a second hotel. I should have been on Dumb as Criminals. I wasn't good at it, but I should have been on Dumb as Criminals. I jumped over the counter, demanded the money. The young man gave it to me. I ran face first into the door. I was so drunk, I knocked myself out. It happened. The young man walked over. He lifted me up. He opened the door, and I ran. He was a college student. I was right across the street from the college. My buddy left me. The car was gone. Exit strategy was gone. I took off running through the neighborhoods, the lights, I could hear them, I could hear the sirens, I could hear everything. I'm running as fast as I can. I could see the lights. I ran face first through a picket fence. 6, 7 cops tackled me. I remember sitting there in jail. That's the only part of my life that I do not remember is those first couple of days in jail. I heard about them later on by some very bad people who told me how I entered into that. But all I can say is that the rage and the anger that came off of me caused them to just go back into their cells and leave me alone. More to the story. But after I ended up confessing to everything, and I don't remember much about that, but what I do remember is at 3 a.m. a couple days later, there was a thought that entered into my mind. You said you would dedicate your life to me. It wasn't an audible voice. It was a thought. It was a remembrance of what had happened in the jailhouse a year before that. That's what that was. For the first time in my life, I clearly recognized my sin in comparison to a holy God. I was broken. I was on my knees. I rolled off that metal bed. I cried out to God. I begged God for forgiveness. I didn't need a restored life. I didn't need health. I didn't need wealth. I didn't need anything. All I needed was a confession and forgiveness. That's all I cared about. I didn't care about how much jail time. I didn't need to be released from jail. I didn't fully understand what it means to dedicate your life, but I knew that I didn't want to just be a Christian on Sunday. I didn't want my Christianity to just be another mask that I put on where God would continue to take last place in my life when I was drowning. I wanted things shifted around to where God became my priority. If I was going to do this thing, if I was going to dedicate my life to Christ, then I wanted to be committed to Him. I wanted to be loyal to Him. I wanted to passionately pursue Him, and I wanted His power in my life. The next morning, I began to reflect upon and understand the people in my life. The people, whether that included my parents, that included friends, all of the people, I began to understand that they had their own mixing bowl. They had their own ingredients of struggles and life issues and good and bad that helped to formulate how they behaved and how they acted and how they interacted with people, how they dealt with relationships, all of those things that they had on their side that shaped their worldview. I began to realize that it wasn't their fault, it was my fault. I had to take responsibility for my own actions. I had to examine myself and understand all of these things in order for me to make the right phone calls and call them and ask for forgiveness. So I called my parents, I called my friends, I called everybody that I knew. I admitted my pain, I admitted my confusion, and I asked for forgiveness. I didn't do this with any expectation how it would be received or if they would even ask me for forgiveness. I just needed to lay it out for them. I dealt with every ingredient, every experience, every person that I used as an excuse to drink or to express myself in an ungodly manner. And even though I was facing 64 years in prison for these 2 robberies, something had changed. Something drastically changed on the inside. The fear, the anger, the confusion, the loneliness, the depression, the anxiety, they were gone. And from that day, December 7th, 1995, I have never had a desire to drink. I've never had a desire to try to usurp authority or power or control over people. It is no longer about what I can get out of people. It's about what I can pour into people as I passionately pursue Christ, to know Him and to make Him known. I spent 6.5 years in prison plus another 5 years on paper pursuing Christ. This is really where my story gets really good, but I don't have time to tell you. I think I'm close. How much time do I have? He went long, so can I go long? Thanks.
5 minutes, something like that.
Can I have 10? Okay. I saturated my mind with the Word of God. I poured into Christ all day, every day. I spent 14, 16, sometimes 18 hours a day, no less than 14 hours a day reading the Word of God, saturating my mind with everything. From the beginning to the end, I got underneath some men that had spent 20 plus years in prison who were, for the most part, faithful in their walk with Christ. I pressed into God because He was all that I had. The ingredients that I allowed to shape me, the ingredients of my past that I allowed to define my life, that I gave permission to define my life, began to be renewed by the saturation of the Word of God. I had spent my life blaming my identity on the ingredients. It was everybody else's fault. You made me this way. It's not my fault. My identity and purpose in Christ, for the first time in my life, became clear. The hatred in my heart was replaced with patience, kindness, love, gentleness, joy, compassion, understanding towards other people. I was incapable of any of these things because those things are found in God. Those things are the fruit of the Spirit, not the fruit of Kevin. So if any point in time prior to this moment of transformation that God did in my life, if I did any of those things to any of you, it wasn't me. It was me for me. There was selfish ambition, selfish motive behind that. But something shifted. There was a rebirth within me to where all of my pursuit in life began to be about you. I engaged with inmates, I engaged with guards and family. I became aware of their own mixing bowls, the experiences that shaped their lives, and I began to listen intently with a desire to truly understand. Not just to hear, I wanted to understand what was behind all of that. Only then could I truly minister to them. Only then could I eventually become a father and raise children to seek and glorify God. Only then could I come alongside people and mature them or be an instrument in the hand of God to mature people beyond the person in the mirror. Do you understand what I mean by that? If we're honest with ourselves, we have to admit at times it's hard to outrun the person in the mirror. It's very hard. I don't care how old you are. I don't care male, female. You have to be honest with yourself and understand that we tend to only see our failures. We tend to look in the mirror and we see our wrinkles, we see our hair loss, we see our failed dreams, we see our mistakes, we see our other people's opinions about who we are, the ingredients that shape our worldview. And then we try to outrun that in order to appease our own guilt and conscience on the inside, trying to say, no, that can't be me. What other people say about me isn't me. You see, we tend to want sometimes God's best before we're willing to give him his best. God, if you give me success, if you give me wealth, if you give me a good marriage, if you help me and my wife get along, if you give me obedient kids, fill in the blank, then I'll be able to pursue you. Then things will be aligned, the stars will be aligned for me to put you first. If you would just give me all of these things, I promise you, friends, to one degree or another, the same wrong perspectives that you have about yourself, everyone in this room deals with at one point in time or another. At one moment of the day or another, all trying to appease other people. Why? What is the underlying ingredient in our lives that we have to purposely identify and deal with in order to put God first and not people, in the sense of identity? When I was released from prison, I founded my first business in 2004. And from the beginning on, I built that company on the foundation of ministry mindedness. And what do I mean by that? If you have been saved by the blood of Christ, you have been saved unto the ministry of that same blood. Does that make sense? It is no longer about Kevin's initiative. It's no longer about what I want, my likes, my joys, my things, my stuff, my whatever time I can escape from this world for me. It's no longer about me. As Christians, our identity, our purpose is defined by what he says, not by what I want or how I feel. Paul wrote, it is no longer I who liveth, but Christ who liveth in me. Where did Paul get that? Where did Paul get to the point to say success in life is a tent maker? His education, all of those things. It's no longer about any of those things. The only thing that matters is Christ living in me. He got that because Jesus said, I didn't come to do my will, implying that in his humanity he had one. He said, I came to do the will of him who sent me. My goal in leadership was never about personal wealth. It was never about possessions or recognition. CorKat is simply the vessel through which God allows us to minister to others. The mindset overflows from our leaders, and there are several in this room, and our staff. As they assist their peers, even our clients, they do so with an understanding of who's on the other end. When we get a phone call and somebody's upset about their printer not working or their computer not working, our staff has a deep understanding that it's not about the problem. It's about what's going on behind the scenes, because we want to leave that person in a better place. We understand that there's something else going on that's triggering them, because it's not about a printer not printing. They got 5 more printers they can print to. That's not the problem. We're ministry minded in the sense that we want to have the proper tone. We want to have the proper communication. We want to have the proper words. We want to be able to bring them down off of the ledge so that they can go home and be a better mother. So that they can go home and be a better wife or a better husband. So they can be a better coworker. So they can succeed. We're ministry minded because it's not about the task, it's about the person. I reminded you earlier, the success of CorKat isn't about our policies, isn't about our procedures, our service delivery. The secret to our success is a commitment to developing and reaching people to help them reach their full potential. We recognize that no 2 people are alike. No 2 employees are alike. My 2 kids are not alike. They are complete opposites. They have to be handled differently. They have to be ministered to differently. Their motivations are different. Some people are motivated by money. Other people are motivated by time off, vacation. Many people are just motivated by hearing, "I'm proud of you. Man, you're doing a good job." You know, I have people that come in and say, "Man, I'm trying to sell this product," or "I'm trying to do this, and it's not going well." These people are doing it. Brother, keep moving forward. One step in front of another. Be positive. Be excited about why you're serving them. You're not about providing them solutions. You're ministering into people's lives. No 2 people are the same. We place expectations on people that they're not capable of meeting, and that's why we hire with an understanding or a mindset of investing. Not just to train people or to train employees for tasks. Not just to tell our kids to clean the room, but over time to understand their unique life experiences, to engage in them at a deeper level, to understand where they're coming from, whether it's in the home, in the workplace, or the community. Our mixing bowl influences our behavior, it influences our conduct, it influences our character. It includes how we complete tasks, how we minister to people, how we talk to clients, how we talk to people in the church, how we talk to our family, how we talk to our kids, how we engage in teamwork. We take the time to develop those around us, to mold them, to minister to them, and to shape the men and women that God has brought into our lives to be what God has called them to be. Not the employee that we want them to be. The job performance, growth, financial success, revenue, that simply is a byproduct of investing in people for their good and God's glory. Amen? Do we have time for roundtable? All right, we're going to do a roundtable discussion. I'm going to lead you into that. Do I need to bring up? Here's the question. This is a tough question. It really is, because it causes you to have to think about your own life. It begins with you. What struggles or what influenced your life? And now that we have an understanding that it's really about the struggles of other people, the influences of other people, the experiences of other people. How well do you know the personal and professional aspirations of your employees? I'm not talking about inside your company, because they may not be with you in 3 or 4 years. I'm talking about getting to know them. How well do you know what they want to do in life? How well do you know what you want to do in life? Or are you just doing what is good for you today? How many of you are doing what you dreamed to do as a child? 2? Out of this whole room. How do you know that the majority of men live with a sense of depression and anxiety over not fulfilling that childhood dream? They don't talk about it. We won't. We're too tough. But the majority of men struggle from time to time because they've never fulfilled their childhood dream of what they wanted to be. I encourage you to take a few minutes, discuss this at your table, and answer that question for you.